I always thought my life with Clara was something solid, like a house built on stone. 20 years married, 2 kids grown and off to college, a quiet routine of mornings with coffee and evenings with wine. She was my anchor, or so I believed. Petite, with auburn hair that still caught the light like it did when we met at 23. I'm James, a structural engineer, a man who calculates load-bearing walls for a living, so I should have seen the cracks. But I didn't. Not until that Thursday in late March, when the air smelled of rain and betrayal crept into my world like damp rot. It started innocently enough. Clara had been spending more time at her pottery studio downtown. She'd taken up ceramics a year ago, a hobby to fill the empty nest, and I encouraged it. "You need something for you?" I'd said, kissing her forehead as she packed her clay-stained apron. She'd smile, her green eyes crinkling, and head out. Lately, though, the sessions stretched longer. 6 p.m. became 8 p.m., then 10. She'd come home flushed, blaming the kiln's heat, her hands still gritty with clay. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? Trust was the rebar in our marriage. That Thursday, I finished work early. A client canceled, leaving me with a rare free afternoon. I decided to surprise her at the studio, maybe take her to dinner at that Italian place she loved. The studio was in a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and artsy clutter. I parked, grabbed the umbrella since the sky was threatening, and walked in. The place hummed with chatter, potters at their wheels, shelves of half-glazed bowls. Clara wasn't at her usual spot. I asked Mia, the wiry woman who ran the place, where she was. "Oh, Clara? She left an hour ago. Said she had an errand." Mia shrugged, spinning her wheel. An errand? At 4 p.m.? My stomach tightened, but I brushed it off. Maybe she'd gone for groceries. Called her. No answer. Texted. Nothing. By the time I got home, the unease had settled in like a guest I couldn't ask to leave. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I waited, pacing the kitchen, the clock ticking past 6, then 7. At 8:14, headlights swept the windows. She walked in, hair damp, carrying no bags, no clay on her hands. "Where've you been?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Oh, just lost track of time at the studio," she said, avoiding my eyes. I nodded, but the lie hung there, heavy as wet plaster. That night I couldn't sleep. Her breathing beside me was too steady, too rehearsed. I stared at the ceiling, replaying her words, her flushed cheeks. Something was off. I'm not a suspicious man. I design things to stand, not fall, but doubt is a slow acid. It eats through everything. By morning, I decided I needed proof. Not because I wanted to believe she'd stray, but because I couldn't unsee the signs. I'd check her phone, her car, her story. I'd find the truth, whatever it was, and shore up the foundation, or tear it down myself. Friday morning, Clara left for the studio again. She kissed my cheek, a quick peck that felt like a formality, and was out the door before I could ask her plans. I waited until her car disappeared down the street, then went to work. Not my office job, my new project. I started with her phone, but she'd taken it. Smart. Next, her car. It was still in the garage from last night. A silver SUV I'd bought her 2 years ago. I popped the trunk, rifled through the grocery bags she hadn't unpacked. Nothing unusual: cereal, milk, a receipt from Tuesday. Then I checked the passenger seat. A folded scarf, navy blue, not hers. I held it up. It smelled faintly of cologne, sharp and unfamiliar. My pulse quickened. I moved to the GPS. Clara wasn't tech-savvy. She'd never think to clear it. I scrolled through recent destinations. The studio popped up. Sure, but so did an address I didn't recognize. 47 Oakwood Lane, 15 miles west. Entered yesterday at 3:42 p.m. My hands shook as I typed it into my phone. A residential area, quiet, upscale. No stores, no errands. Who lived there? I could have driven over right then, but I needed more. I needed to see her lie again to catch the pattern. That evening, she came home at 9:30. I was on the couch pretending to read. "Long day?" I asked. She nodded, kicking off her shoes. "Yeah, glazing takes forever." You should come watch sometime. Her voice was too bright, like she'd rehearsed it. I smiled, tight-lipped. Maybe I will. She didn't notice the edge in my tone. Over the next few days, I watched her closer. She'd text with her phone angled away, laugh at messages she wouldn't share. Once, she left it on the counter while showering. I grabbed it, punched in her passcode, our anniversary, predictable, and scrolled. A name caught my eye, Tom. No last name, just Tom. The messages were vague but damning. Can't wait to see you. Yesterday was amazing. Tell him it's a late class. My chest burned. Tom. Who was Tom? I snapped photos of the screen with my phone, hands trembling so bad I nearly dropped it. She came out of the bathroom, towel-wrapped, and I slid her phone back just in time. Everything okay? She asked, brushing her hair. Fine, I lied. That night I dug deeper. I cross-checked her pottery class roster. Mia emailed it to me after a casual request. No Tom. But there was a Thomas Hargrove, a guest instructor from last month. I Googled him. Mid-40s, lean, artsy type with a smug grin. Lived at 47 Oakwood Lane. The pieces clicked, but I wasn't done. I needed to see it to know how far this went. Monday, I called in sick, rented a nondescript sedan, and followed her. She left at 2 p.m., claiming a supply run. I tailed her at a distance, heart pounding as she turned not toward the studio, but west. Oakwood Lane. She parked outside a modern house. Glass windows, manicured lawn. A man stepped out. Thomas. Tall, confident, wearing that scarf. She hugged him, long and close, then followed him inside. I sat there, gripping the wheel, the world tilting. My wife, my Clara, with him. It wasn't standard, not some cheap fling. It was deliberate, intimate, a betrayal carved in clay. I didn't confront her that day. Rage boiled in me, but I'm an engineer. I build, I plan, I don't just swing a hammer. I drove home, the image of Clara in Thomas's arms searing my skull. Her laugh, her touch, given to him. I needed to understand why, how long, and what it meant. Then I'd decide what to do. Revenge wasn't a word I lingered on yet. It was a shape forming in the dark, waiting for structure. For now, I gathered evidence like blueprints, precise and cold. I started with their digital trail. Her phone was locked tighter now. She'd changed the passcode, but I had other ways. I logged into our shared cloud account from my laptop. Clara never remembered to clear her backups. Photos synced automatically. Most were mundane pots, kids, us at Christmas. Then I found it. A selfie, dated 2 months ago. Her and Thomas, cheeks pressed together, smiling in what looked like his kitchen. Another, her in a robe, him kissing her neck. My stomach lurched. I saved them to a hidden folder, bile rising. Next, I tracked her movements. I'd installed a GPS app on her phone years ago for safety. She'd forgotten about it. The history showed Oakwood Lane twice a week, sometimes more, stretching back 4 months. 4 months of lies. I printed the logs, stapled them into a neat stack. Evidence wasn't enough, though. I needed to hear it to see how she justified it. Wednesday, I set a trap. I'm working late tomorrow, I told her over dinner. Big project deadline. She nodded, eyes flicking to her plate. Okay. I might stay late at the studio then. Perfect. Thursday, I didn't go to work. I waited in the rented sedan 2 streets from Oakwood Lane, binoculars ready. At 3:15, her SUV pulled up. Thomas greeted her at the door, casual, like she belonged there. They went inside. I gave it an hour, then crept closer, parking behind a hedge. The house had big windows, stupid design for privacy. Through the glass, I saw them in the living room. She was laughing, pouring wine. He touched her arm, then her waist. They moved out of sight, upstairs probably. I didn't need to see more. My hands clenched the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. That night, she came home at 10, humming. Good day, I asked, voice steady. Yeah, made a new vase, she said, showing me a photo on her phone. A lie, her hands were clean, no clay. I nodded, plotting. Friday, I dug into Thomas. Public records showed he was divorced, no kids, a sculptor with a small following. His Instagram was full of artsy shots, some with Clara, captioned vaguely, "Inspiration strikes." Her comments underneath hearts and winks. Public, shameless. My jaw tightened. This wasn't a fling. It was a life she'd built behind my back. I called an old college friend, Mark, who'd gone into private investigation. "I need dirt," I told him, sending Thomas's name and address. "Anything finances, habits, secrets." Mark didn't ask why, just said, "Give me a week." I spent that week pretending. Kissing Clara goodnight, eating her dinners, all while the shape of revenge grew sharper. I didn't know what form it'd take, but it'd be cruel, meticulous. A collapse she'd never see coming. She'd taken my trust, my home, and handed it to him. I take something back, something bigger. Mark came through faster than I expected. Tuesday morning, he emailed me a file labeled Hargrove. I opened it at my desk, door locked, coffee cold. Thomas wasn't just a sculptor, he was a leech. Divorced twice, not once, with alimony payments bleeding him dry. He declared bankruptcy 3 years ago, then clawed back with art grants and consulting gigs. Mark found unpaid taxes, a DUI from 2019, and a restraining order from an ex-girlfriend who'd called him manipulative. The kicker? A second mortgage on 47 Oakwood Lane, leveraged to the hilt. He was drowning in debt, and Clara, my Clara, was his lifeline. I leaned back, processing. She wasn't just giving him her time. She was funding him. Our savings had dipped lately. $10,000 over 6 months. Blamed on house repairs we never did. I pulled bank statements. Withdrawals, cash, no receipts. She'd been siphoning it to him, probably thinking I wouldn't notice. I'm not a financial genius, but I know numbers. The pattern was clear. My wife wasn't just straying. She was bankrolling her lover's life. The betrayal twisted deeper, a knife with a serrated edge. I confronted her that night, but not directly. I needed her to dig her hole. "Money's tight," I said over dinner, casual. "We should cut back. Maybe skip the studio for a bit." Her fork froze midair. "It's not that much," she snapped, too quick. "It's my thing, James." I nodded, watching her squirm. "Just saying, $10,000 gone this year. Weird, right?" Her face paled, but she recovered. Materials, kiln fees. It adds up. Lies stacked on lies. I let it drop, but the trap was set. Wednesday, I escalated. I hired a locksmith, changed the house locks while she was at the studio. When she got home at 9, fumbling with her key, I opened the door. "Lost your key?" I asked, smiling. She blinked, flustered. "No, it's not working." I shrugged. "Had to change them, security thing." I handed her a new key, watching her process it. She wouldn't risk a scene, not yet. But I saw the panic in her eyes. She knew I was closing in. That night, I moved my evidence to a safe deposit box. Photos, logs, Mark's file, insurance. Thursday, I followed her again. This time, I brought a camera, high-res, borrowed from a coworker. She met Thomas at a cafe first, not his house. Public, bold. They sat close, her hand on his. I snapped shots from across the street, hidden by a newspaper. She passed him an envelope, cash, no doubt. My lens caught it all. The exchange, the smiles, the way she leaned into him. I had enough to bury her legally, but that wasn't the plan. Divorce was too clean. I wanted ruin, hers, his, total. Friday, the shape of revenge solidified. I'd used their weaknesses. Her trust in me, his desperation. I called Mark again. "Can you fake documents? Loan agreements? Signatures?" He hesitated, then said, "Yeah, but it's dicey." "What's the play?" I told him. "Forge a loan from me to Thomas, $50,000, with his house as collateral. Backdate it 6 months, make it look like he begged me for it." Mark whistled. "That's cold, man. If he can't pay, and he can't, you'd own him." Exactly. Clara would think I'd known all along, that I'd played benefactor to her lover. The humiliation would gut her. Thomas? He'd lose everything. Saturday, I laid the groundwork. I met Mark at a diner, cash in hand. He slid me the forged papers, loan agreement, notarized, Thomas's signature traced from a public art contract. It looked real enough to fool a lawyer. "You sure about this?" Mark asked, pocketing the money. "He'll fight it." I nodded. "Let him. He's got no ground." The plan was simple. Present the loan to Thomas, demand repayment he couldn't make, then seize his house. Clara would see it unfold, powerless, her secret exposed in the wreckage. Sunday, I tested her again. "Ran into an old friend," I said over breakfast, casual. "Thomas Hargrove. Says he knows you." Her coffee cup clinked hard against the saucer. "Oh, yeah. Guest instructor at the studio." She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Funny, he didn't mention pottery. Asked about you, though. Seemed close." Her laugh was brittle. "Artists are weird. Don't know him well." I smiled, letting the silence stretch. She excused herself, hands shaky. I'd rattled her cage. Monday, I struck. I drove to Oakwood Lane, papers in a manila envelope. Thomas answered the door, scarf around his neck, smug as ever. "James, right? Clara's husband." His tone was too familiar, a taunt. I handed him the envelope. "You owe me $50,000. 6 months overdue. Pay up or I take the house." His smirk faded as he read. "What is this?" I cut him off. "Signed and dated. Check the notary. You've got a week." He stammered, red-faced. "This is fake. I'll call my lawyer." I shrugged. "Go ahead. Explain it to Clara while you're at it." I left him sputtering, drove home, and waited. Clara stormed in at 6, eyes wild. "What did you do to Tom?" she yelled, dropping the pretense. "He's freaking out. Some loan?" I leaned back, calm. "Oh, you know Tom now? Funny, I lent him money months ago." "He didn't tell you?" Her mouth opened, closed. "You're lying," she whispered. I pulled out the forged paper, kept a copy for this. "See for yourself." She scanned it, hands trembling, then sank into a chair. "I don't know how." She couldn't finish. The lie unraveled, and I watched her twist in it. Tuesday, Thomas called. "This is insane. I never signed this." I stayed cool. "Prove it in court. Meanwhile, I'm filing foreclosure. Hope Clara's worth it." He hung up, panicked. By Wednesday, the cracks spread. Clara barely spoke, avoiding me, her phone silent. No more texts to Tom. I heard from Mark. Thomas was scrambling, calling banks, lawyers, anyone. His house was already underwater. He couldn't fight me. I timed it perfectly. His debt, her guilt, my leverage. The revenge wasn't done, but it was close. She'd lose him, he'd lose everything, and I'd watch it burn. Thursday morning, the house was a tomb. Clara shuffled around like a ghost, her eyes red, her auburn hair unbrushed. She hadn't slept. I heard her pacing half the night, muttering to herself. I sipped my coffee, watching her over the rim, silent. She didn't ask about Thomas again, didn't dare. The forged loan had done its job. Planted doubt, fractured her story. She thought I'd known about them for months, that I'd played some long game. Good. Let her stew in it. I wasn't ready to show my full hand yet. I went to work, but my mind stayed on the plan. Thomas's house was the linchpin. Take it and he'd collapse. Clara would follow. I called my lawyer, Dan, a bulldog of a man who'd handled property disputes for me before. "Got a debtor," I told him, emailing the fake loan docs. "He's defaulting. Need foreclosure started." Dan skimmed them, grunting approval. "Airtight on paper. I'll file today, expedited." He'll have 30 days to contest. But with his finances, dead in the water. I thanked him, hung up, and smiled. The gears were turning. That afternoon, I checked Thomas's social media. He'd posted a cryptic rant. "Some people play dirty. Truth will out." Clara had liked it, her little heart icon a stab in my gut. She was still tethered to him, even now. I scrolled his followers, found a local reporter, and sent an anonymous tip. Sculptor Thomas Hargrove facing foreclosure, shady loans. Dig deeper. By evening, a small blog post popped up, speculating about his financial troubles. Perfect. Public shame would tighten the noose. Clara came home late, her face drawn. "Tom's in trouble," she said, testing me. I shrugged, flipping through a magazine. "Sounds like his problem." She glared, but her voice cracked. "You did this, didn't you?" I met her eyes cold. "I lent him money. He didn't pay. That's how it works." She stormed off, slamming the bedroom door. I didn't follow. Let her rage. She'd built this mess. That night, I dug into our joint accounts again. Another $2,000 gone, withdrawn yesterday. She was still feeding him, even as his world burned. My jaw clenched. Time to cut that lifeline. Friday, I visited the bank. "Freeze her access," I told the manager, showing our marriage certificate and account ownership. "Primary holder's discretion, right?" He nodded, tapping keys. "Done." Clara's cards would bounce by noon. I pictured her at an ATM, confused, then furious. A small cruelty, but it fit the design. She'd feel the walls closing in, just like Thomas. I drove home, plotting the next phase. The house was only half the revenge. His ruin wouldn't satisfy me unless hers matched it. She'd humiliated me, hollowed out our life. I'd hollow hers back. Saturday, the fallout hit. Clara's phone rang nonstop. "Thomas," I assumed, until she silenced it. She cornered me in the kitchen, hands on hips. "My card's not working. What did you do?" Her voice trembled, caught between anger and fear. I leaned against the counter, calm. "Tight budget, remember? Had to adjust things." She stared, mouth working silently, then grabbed her purse and left. I didn't stop her. She'd run to him, probably, but with no money to give, what could she do? I'd starved their affair of oxygen. Mark called that afternoon. "Hargrove's a mess. Lawyer says he's got no case, your docs hold up. He's begging friends for cash, but his credit's shot." I nodded, satisfied. "Keep me posted." The foreclosure filing had gone public, county records showed it, and the reporter's blog updated. "Local artist's home at risk." Comments piled up, some pitying, some gleeful. I sipped a beer, imagining Thomas scrolling through, sweating. Clara wasn't home yet. Fine. Let her see his panic up close. She stumbled in at midnight, mascara streaked. "He's losing everything," she whispered, more to herself than me. I stayed silent, flipping TV channels. She hovered, then blurted, "You're cruel, James. I didn't think you could be this cruel." I turned, meeting her gaze. "Funny, I didn't think you could be a liar. Guess we're both surprised." She flinched, retreating upstairs. I didn't sleep that night, I planned. The unusual twist in her betrayal wasn't just Thomas. It was the life she'd built with him. The pottery a cover for something deeper. I'd expose it, then crush it. Sunday, I visited the studio. Mia was there, glazing a mug. "Clara's been off lately," I said casual. "She mention anything?" Mia hesitated, then shrugged. "She's been working on a big project with Tom. Some joint exhibit. Private stuff, I guess." "An exhibit?" My pulse spiked. "Where's it at?" Mia pointed to a locked room. "Back there. She's picky about it." I thanked her, left, and called a locksmith friend. "Pete. Need a favor. Off the books." He agreed to meet me Monday. I'd see this project myself. Monday, Pete cracked the lock in 10 minutes. The room was dim, stacked with crates. I pried one open, ceramic figures, entwined, intimate. Clara's style, Thomas's flourish. Dozens of them, labeled for a gallery show next month. A love letter in clay hidden from me. My chest burned. She hadn't just given him money and time. She'd poured our marriage into this, sculpted it for the world to see. I snapped photos, resealed the crate, and thanked Pete. The revenge sharpened. I'd let her unveil it, then turn it to ash. Tuesday, Clara was a wreck. She barely ate, her phone dead on the counter. No cash to charge it, I guessed. I kept up the charade, humming as I cooked breakfast. "Big day?" I asked. She mumbled something about the studio, avoiding me. I let her go, knowing she'd find Thomas. The foreclosure clock was ticking, 25 days left. Dan texted, "He's got no defense. House is yours soon." I grinned. But the house was just the frame. The exhibit was the heart. I'd hit both. I called the gallery hosting their show, posing as a buyer. Heard about Hargrove's exhibit. Details? The manager chirped. Oh, it's stunning. Him and Clara Weston, a duo piece. Opens April 20th. Weston, my name, tied to him. I thanked her, hung up, and researched. The gallery was small, artsy, perfect for sabotage. I contacted a friend in construction, Greg. Need a favor, I said. Can you mess with a building? Nothing permanent, just disruptive? He laughed. Like what? I outlined it. Flood the basement, cut power, subtle chaos. For you? Sure. When? I set it for the 19th, night before the opening. Wednesday, Clara came home with a flyer, their exhibit, Clay Bonds, in bold print. She left it on the table, a quiet defiance. I studied it, her name, a photo of one sculpture, a couple embracing. My stomach twisted. She'd planned to parade this, to stand beside him while I sat home, clueless. I pocketed the flyer, called Greg. Make it messy. He promised a deluge. That night, I overheard her on a borrowed phone, whispering, We'll figure it out, Tom. I'll sell something. Still fighting for him. I'd end that too. Thursday, Mark sent photos. Thomas at a pawn shop hawking tools. Desperate. I smiled, then dug into Clara's jewelry box. Her grandmother's ruby ring, worth thousands, was gone. Sold, no doubt, for him. My hands shook. She'd traded family heirlooms for his sinking ship. I photographed the empty slot, added it to my evidence. The revenge crystallized. I'd let her think the exhibit would save him, then rip it away. Publicly, brutally. Friday, I visited Thomas. He looked haggard, scarf gone, eyes bloodshot. You win, he rasped. I can't pay. Take the house. I nodded, feigning sympathy. Shame about the exhibit too. Heard it's a bust. He froze. What? I shrugged. Just rumors. I left him rattled, drove home, and waited. Clara was out, probably plotting with him. Good. Let them hope. It'd make the fall harder. Saturday, Clara started packing. Not clothes, pottery tools, sketchbooks, pieces of her life with me. What's this? I asked, leaning in the doorway. She didn't look up. Moving stuff to the studio. Need space. A lie, she was prepping to bolt, to him or somewhere else. I let her, watching the boxes stack. She thought she had an escape. She didn't. The foreclosure was 20 days out. The exhibit 18. My timeline was tight, but perfect. Sunday, I followed her again. She drove to a storage unit, unloaded the boxes with Thomas. They argued, sharp gestures, her tears, his pacing. I snapped photos from the car, catching her handing him another envelope. Where was she getting cash now? I checked our retirement account later. Untouched, thankfully. Probably pawned more jewelry. I didn't care. Every move she made dug her deeper. That night, she came home silent, avoiding me. I cooked dinner, humming, letting her feel the pressure. Monday, the reporter's blog updated. Hargrove's woes mount. Gallery show in jeopardy? Greg's work was set. The gallery would flood soon. I called Dan. Foreclosures on track? He confirmed. He's got no fight left. House is yours in 2 weeks. I thanked him, then emailed the gallery anonymously. Check your basement. Leak issues. Seed planted. Tuesday, Clara was frantic, on the phone all morning. Water damage? How bad? She cried. I eavesdropped, smirking. Greg had delivered pipes burst, soaking the gallery's storage. Their precious sculptures were at risk. She left in a panic, returning at dusk, defeated. The show's delayed, she muttered, slumping on the couch. Everything's ruined. I nodded, feigning concern. Tough break. She glared, suspecting me but with no proof. I covered my tracks. Greg used an untraceable crew, cash only. Wednesday, Thomas called her. I heard his voice through the wall, pleading. We can rebuild, Clara. Don't give up. She sobbed, promising to try. I gritted my teeth. Rebuild? Not if I could help it. Thursday, I struck again. I contacted a local art critic, sent photos of the clay bond sculptures from the studio, claiming they were stolen designs. Check Hargrove's past, he's got a history. I wrote anonymous. The critic bit, Friday's paper ran a piece. Plagiarism cloud over local exhibit. Thomas's name, Clara's, smeared in print. She read it at breakfast, gasping, then fled to him. I followed, watched them argue outside his house. Her yelling, him gesturing wildly. The cracks were widening. My revenge was a slow quake, shaking them apart. Saturday, Clara didn't come home. She texted, "Staying at a friend's. Need time." I didn't reply. Let her think she had control. I knew she was with Thomas. Mark confirmed it, tailing them to a cheap motel. His house was days from seizure, the exhibit a wreck. They were clinging to scraps. I spent the day finalizing the endgame. The house would be mine soon, but I wanted more, her pride, his future, shredded beyond repair. Sunday, I drove to the motel. They were loading boxes into her SUV. Pottery, clothes, a desperate move. I didn't approach, just watched, snapping photos. Evidence for later. Back home, I called the gallery owner, posing as a concerned neighbor. Heard about the flood. Shame, those sculptures looked familiar. Maybe borrowed. She bristled, promising to investigate. Another nail in their coffin. Monday, the critic's article spread online. Galleries pulled Thomas's older works, citing ethics concerns. His career teetered. Tuesday, Clara returned, hollow-eyed. "We need to talk," she said, voice flat. I sat, arms crossed. "Go ahead." She took a breath. "I've been with Tom. I'm leaving." No surprise, but the admission stung, raw, deliberate. "Okay," I said, calm. "Take what's yours. Leave the rest." She blinked, expecting a fight. I didn't give her one. She packed a suitcase, avoiding my gaze, and left. I let her go, knowing she'd hit bottom soon. Wednesday, Dan called. "Foreclosure's final. House is yours tomorrow." I thanked him, then drove to Oakwood Lane. Thomas was there, loading a U-Haul, Clara helping. I walked up, keys in hand. "Time's up," I said, holding the deed. He lunged, furious, but Clara grabbed his arm. "Don't, Tom." I smiled. "Smart move. Enjoy the motel." They glared, helpless, as I took possession. Inside, I found their life, photos, notes, a clay heart with their initials. I smashed it, ground it to dust. Thursday, the gallery canceled clay bonds outright. Too much scandal, too little trust. Clara called, sobbing. "You've ruined us. Happy now?" I paused, then said, "You ruined us. I just finished it." She hung up. Revenge wasn't sweet. It was cold, precise. A structure collapsing under its own weight. 5 parts left to seal their fate. Friday morning, I woke to silence. Clara was gone. The house hollowed out like a gutted building. Her absence didn't ache. It fueled me. Thomas's house was mine now, a trophy of their collapse, but the job wasn't done. She'd walked away thinking she could start over, that her confession freed her. She was wrong. I'd taken his home, her money, their exhibit. Next, I'd take her identity, the last piece she clung to. Revenge wasn't just about loss. It was about erasure. I started with the pottery studio. Mia had texted me, worried. "Clara hasn't shown up. Everything okay?" I drove over, feigning concern. "She's taking a break," I lied, eyeing the locked room. "Mind if I grab her stuff? Clear her space." Mia hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, James." I waited until she was busy, then slipped in with Pete's spare key. The crates of clay bond sculptures sat there, fragile and mocking. I didn't smash them, not yet. I loaded them into my truck, every piece a testament to her betrayal. Mia didn't notice. Back home, I cataloged them, 20 figures, each a twisted echo of her and Thomas. I photographed them, then called a contact at a local auction house, posing as a collector. Got some Hargrove Weston originals. Rare, canceled exhibit. Interested. He bit fast. Send pics. If they're legit, we'll sell high. I emailed the shots, knowing the sale would draw attention. Clara would see her precious work peddled off, her name tied to failure. That night, I listed Thomas's house with a realtor, quick sale, below market. Cash in hand mattered more than profit. Saturday, the auction house confirmed, bidding starts Monday. Expect $15,000 minimum. Perfect. I'd funnel the money somewhere she'd never touch. Maybe a trust for the kids. Locked tight. Clara called that afternoon, voice shaky. Tom says you took the house. What's next, James? Kept it cool. Just business. You left. Remember? She huffed. You're a monster. I laughed. Low. You made me one. She hung up and I pictured her in that motel, stewing. Good. Let her feel the squeeze. Sunday I visited the motel. Not to confront, just to watch. Her SUV was parked crooked. Thomas unloading trash bags. They looked worn, diminished. I snapped a photo, then drove to the gallery. The owner was there, still fuming about the flood. Heard the sculptures are surfacing, I said casual. Shame about the scandal. She nodded, bitter. Clara's ruined too. No one'll touch her work now. I hid my grin. Step by step, I dismantled her world. Her art, her lover, her future. Monday, the auction went live online. I watched from my laptop, coffee in hand, as bids climbed $15,000, $000, $18,000, $22,000. Collectors didn't care about the drama. They wanted the rarity. By noon, it closed at $25,000. The auction house wired me the funds, minus their cut. I opened a new account, deposited it, and titled it Kids Future. Clara wouldn't see a dime, but she'd hear about it. I emailed the realtor. Drop the house price another $10,000. Sell fast. He balked but agreed. Chaos was the goal, keep them scrambling. Tuesday, Clara showed up. She pounded on the door, hair wild, eyes blazing. You sold my sculptures? She yelled as I let her in. I nodded, calm. Found them at the studio. Figured they'd fetch a price. She lunged, slapping my chest. Those were mine. Ours. I grabbed her wrists, gentle but firm. You left, Clara. Left everything. They're fair game. She yanked free, sobbing. You're destroying me. I shrugged. You destroyed us first. She fled, tires squealing. I locked the door, unmoved. Wednesday, the realtor called. House sold, cash buyer, $180,000. Closes Friday. Faster than I'd hoped. Thomas would be homeless soon. Clara tethered to his ruin. I checked the motel's guest log. Mark hacked it for me. They'd paid through the week, barely. Her funds were drying up, her options shrinking. That night, I sorted her leftover things, clothes, books, a photo of us at the kids' graduation. I boxed it all, drove to the motel, and dumped it in their parking lot. A message, no coming back. Thursday, the art world buzzed. A blog post, Hargrove Weston pieces fetch thousands, artist duo silent. Clara's name, once respected, now a punchline. I called our daughter Emily in college. Mom's struggling, I said vague. Might reach out. Emily sighed. She texted me. I don't know what to say. I didn't push, let Clara face the kids' distance too. Friday, the house sale closed. I kept the profit, another $170,000 after fees, and locked it away. Thomas's last anchor was gone. Saturday, I heard from Mark. They're fighting. She wants out, he's clinging. I nodded, picturing it, her trapped, him desperate. The unusual betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was her pouring our life into his, sculpting it for display. I turned that into their cage. One more push and it'd collapse completely. Sunday, I rested, not out of mercy but strategy. Clara and Thomas were fraying. I'd let them unravel a bit more. Monday, I struck again. I contacted the Pottery Studio's landlord, an old client of mine. Mia's tenant, Clara Weston. She's behind on rent. I lied, planting the seed. Might skip out. He grunted, promised to check. By Tuesday, Mia called me, flustered. Clara's out. Landlord's locking her space. Says she owes $2,000. I feigned surprise. Rough. Guess her project's done. Mia sighed. Oblivious. Another route pulled. Wednesday, I dug into Thomas's past deeper. Mark found an old lawsuit. Ex-client claimed he'd taken payment for undelivered work. I sent it to the reporter. Anonymous. More dirt on Hargrove. Fraud. Thursday's paper ran it. Sculptor's troubles grow. Past dealings questioned. Galleries dropped him like hot coal. His name was toxic now, Clara's tied to it. She called that night, voice raw. Stop this, James. Please. I paused, then said, You stopped us. I'm just cleaning up. She wept, hung up. No surrender in me, only steel. Friday, I visited the motel again. Their SUV was gone, replaced by a beat-up sedan. Downgraded, desperate. I asked the clerk, slipping him $20. Weston and Hargrove, still here? He nodded. Room 12. Barely paid up. I thanked him, then called the motel owner, posing as a creditor. Got a deadbeat tenant, Hargrove. Might bolt on the bill. He promised to watch them. Saturday, Mark confirmed. Owners evicting them Monday. No cash, no stay. Perfect timing. Sunday, I prepared the final blow. I kept one sculpture, the clay heart with their initials. I photographed it, smashed it, then mailed the pieces to the motel with a note. All that's left. Clara would open it, see the shards, feel the end. Monday, the eviction hit. Mark watched. She screamed, he begged. They're out. Stuff on the curb. I pictured it. Her in the rain, him helpless. Their life in trash bags. The unusual betrayal had been her crafting a world without me. I'd unmade it, piece by piece. Tuesday, I heard from Emily. Mom called, crying. She's with Tom, some friend's couch. What happened? Kept it vague. She chose him. It didn't work out. Emily didn't press, her silence said enough. Clara's bridges were ash. I leaned back, the house quiet. My revenge a completed structure. Cold, solid, unyielding. Wednesday, I tied up loose ends. The kids' trust was funded. $195,000 from the house and sculptures. Locked until they turned 30. Clara couldn't touch it, even if she tried. I changed my will, cutting her out. Everything to Emily and Jake now. She'd get nothing if I went first. Thursday, I sold her SUV. Found it abandoned at the motel, title still mine. $8,000 added to the pot. Every trace of her in my life erased or turned to profit. Friday, the reporter called me, sniffing a story. Heard you're Hargrove's creditor. Care to comment? I played dumb. Just a loan gone bad. He couldn't pay. She pushed, but I hung up. The article ran Saturday. Mystery lender sinks artist. Wife's role unclear. Clara's name muddied further. I smiled, imagining her reading it. Trapped on that couch with Thomas. Nowhere to turn. Sunday, I cleaned the house, her photos, her trinkets gone. A fresh start built on their ruin. Monday, Mark sent a final update. They split. She's at a shelter, he's couch surfing. The news hit like a quiet hammer. She'd left him or he'd left her. Didn't matter. The unusual betrayal had been their shared dream. A life sculpted behind my back. I'd shattered it, then them. Tuesday, I drove by the shelter. Saw her in line. Head down. A stranger in her own story. I didn't stop, just looked. Then left. She'd feel that too. My absence, my victory. Wednesday, the studio landlord called. Found Clara's old stuff, pots, tools. Want it? I declined. Donate it. Her last foothold in pottery, gone. Thursday, Thomas's ex-wife emailed me. Mark had tracked her down. Heard you took him down. Thanks, he deserved it. I replied, brief. Glad to help. A small alliance, a bonus twist. Friday, I rested, the plan complete. Their world was rubble. Mine stood firm. Saturday, I got a letter, Clara's handwriting, shaky. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Can we talk? I read it, then burned it. No reply, no mercy. She'd sculpted her betrayal in clay, in secret. I'd forged mine in steel, in silence. The scales balanced cruelly, perfectly. Sunday, March 30th, 2025. A year since the cracks appeared. And here I am, alone, but whole. The house is mine, quiet, reordered. Clara's gone. A shadow in a shelter somewhere. Her art career dust. Thomas drifts, a broken man, his name a cautionary tale. I sit on the porch, coffee steaming, the morning crisp. Revenge wasn't loud or messy. It was precise. A collapse I engineered step by step. She'd betrayed me in a way I never imagined. Not just with him, but with a life she built, funded, and hid. I unbuilt it, brick by brick. Monday, I went back to work. Colleagues asked about Clara, vague rumors swirling. She's moved on, I said, shutting it down. No one pressed. The kids called Emily first, then Jake. Mom's a mess, Emily said. She wants to see us. I stayed neutral. Your choice. They didn't push me for more, sensing the wall I'd raised. Clara's bridges with them might mend, but not with me. I'd made sure of that. Tuesday, the realtor sent a final check, house profit cleared, another $5,000 in fees returned. I added it to the trust, bringing it to $200,000 even. A round number, a clean end. Wednesday, I got an email from the auction house. Buyers asking about more Weston Hargrove works. Got any? I deleted it. Let the vultures circle. There was nothing left to pick over. Thursday, Mia texted. Clara stopped by. Asked about her stuff. Told her it's gone. She just cried. I didn't reply. Friday, I reflected. The unusual betrayal wasn't the act itself. It was the depth, the permanence she'd tried to carve without me. She'd taken our money, our years, and molded them into something for him, for them. My revenge matched it. Not just loss, but obliteration. I'd taken her home, her lover, her art, her name, and left her with shards. Thomas got the same, house gone, career torched, pride ashes. Cruel? Yes. Fair? I think so. Saturday, I started anew. Joined a hiking group, met a woman, Linda, a widow, no baggage. We talked engineering, trails, life. No rush, just company. Sunday, today I sit here, writing this in my head. The story done. Clara and Thomas are footnotes now. Their collapse my foundation. I'm not proud, not ashamed, just finished. The coffee's cold. The sun's up. Time to move.